Hey everybody, thanks for checking out this RynoWorx instructional video. This video will show you how to change the main seal on one of our spray systems with an aluminum pump. In July of 2024, the aluminum pump used on most of our systems was upgraded to a slightly different model. This particular video is for the newer style pump starting from July 2024. The performance and the engine and everything else is identical, however, the instructions for how to change the seal have changed slightly. I recommend that you take a look at our video, how to identify which aluminum pump you have in order to figure out which one you have to make sure that you follow the correct instructions. The link will be in the description below. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. We're going to need about 20 minutes of time and the following tools. So we're going to need a ratchet and we're going to need a 10mm socket to go with that ratchet. We're going to need at least one, if not two, 13mm wrenches. If you have one that's ratcheting, that will make your life a little bit easier. We have a large socket. This one's a 3/4 inch. The size is not overly relevant. This is a 1.5 inch piece of ABS. We've got some paper towels, a small flat screwdriver, a wire wheel. We've also got an impactor with a 3/8 drive socket adapter, some safety gloves, some shop rags, a hammer. You could use a mallet. The piece of wood is used to dislodge the impeller. It doesn't have to be the exact shape of what I have. You're also going to need some thread locker. And finally, in a perfect world, you should have a torque wrench that measures in inch-pounds. Let's go ahead and get started. The first thing we want to do is remove the valve 10 from the top of the pump. There are 4 13mm bolts that holds that in, and also just be careful, there is a rubber gasket there. Just be careful not to damage it when you remove it. We'll just go ahead and speed up this process so we can get it off to the side. Now we want to remove the 4 10mm bolts that holds the front housing to the rear housing. So go ahead and remove those with the impactor or the ratchet. Please note that there is an O-ring between the front and the rear housing, so just be careful when separating the two halves. The volute casting, that's the brownish red thing, just be aware that when you're pulling all of this apart that it will come off as well, and try to support it. There is an O-ring on the back of the volute casting, and keep it safe and off to the side. So now we're going to go ahead and remove that big O-ring, there it is, and set that off to the side. And now we want to remove the actual impeller. So this is removed by turning it counterclockwise, and it can be a bit fiddly to get off. So what I recommend is you take your piece of wood and your hammer and you will line up one of the edges of that impeller and just give it a couple of good whacks. I was lucky it came off on the first time. There are 4 10mm bolts. These have thread locker on them from the factory, so depending on how powerful your impactor is, you may need to start them with the ratchet and go ahead and complete them with the impactor. Now we're going to go ahead and start with removing the old seal. So this is a 3/4 inch socket. The important part is that it's larger than the inner diameter of the seal, but smaller than the diameter of the pump housing cover. So go ahead and give it a couple of light taps on the paper towel. This is the main difference between the old seal and the new seal. The old seal does not have this rubber gasket, and the new seal does. Other than that, they are functionally identical, and you can go ahead and set that off to the side. Now you're going to want to go ahead and grab the impeller and your flat screwdriver and go ahead and gently pry out the other half of the seal and the rubber gasket for that as well. And that's it for removing the old components. I'm not going to waste a new seal on this demonstration. I'm just going to put the old one back in, but use your, well, that's a bit comically overlarge for a wire wheel, but a smaller one and a little bit of elbow grease, and just make sure that those mating surfaces are nice and clean before you go ahead and start putting things back together. Now we're going to want to go ahead and take our paper towel and just put some on top because we don't want to get any debris on that half of the seal. So just to keep it clean, we'll put some paper towel on there, and you can press this in with that same socket that we used before. You should be able to actually press this in by hand. I just happen to have the hammer, and these are gentle little taps. You don't want to be wailing away on that. And just make sure that it's nice and flat and there isn't big pieces of rubber or anything sticking out. So that's good for this purpose, and we'll set that off to the side. So now we're going to put our seal back together, and this is a good time as well where you can get in there and clean the mating surfaces on the rear pump cover. And go ahead and grab your piece of ABS. I'll demonstrate if you don't have a piece of ABS again at the end. So this ABS is perfect. It has the perfect inside and outside diameter that allows it to get right in there and keep the seal nice and clean, but allow you to go ahead and press fit it. And what I mean by easier than the old system, you can actually just push that in by hand, which on the old style, you actually had to whack it with the hammer. So let me just redo what I showed you if you don't have that piece of ABS. And if you have tiny little hands like I do, you should be able to go ahead and reach in there and press fit that seal using nothing but your fingers. All right, let's go ahead and move on to the reassembly. All right, we're going to start by grabbing the back plate, and you'll see there is a notch here. Make sure that that notch is facing down. Now there's 4 bolts. Go ahead and put a little bit of thread locker on these before you reinsert them. There is no particular torque setting here. They should be snug, but I would recommend that you go around and adjust them close to being tight and then lock them down following the same way you would change a tire. So do one and then its opposite, rotate, and then do its opposite. And now would be a good time to clean off that back cover before we reseat the O-ring. Now we're going to go ahead and reseat that large black O-ring. Now we're going to reattach the impeller to the shaft. Make sure you thread this by hand and do not cross thread or you will have a bad day. Now we're going to grab the volute casting, and this is a good time to just double check the O-ring on the back of that casting to make sure it's in good working order, and you can clean it off if necessary. You will notice that there is a notch cut out, and those line up perfectly with a little tab in the front cover of the aluminum pump housing. So go ahead and align that up. Now you're going to support this with your finger and go ahead and match it up with the back cover. Be careful not to tear that gasket. And similar to before, just snug them up so they're close to being tight, and then once they're all of the same level of tightness, go ahead and torque one of them down. Go ahead and tighten one of them down and then do its diagonal, and then go across and then do its diagonal. So you're going to do like a star pattern. And work your way around again until they're all good and snug. No specific torque setting here, just snug. Don't over tighten them, because if you strip them, you will have a bad day. All that's left to do is to put the valve 10 back on top of the pump. You should also notice the orientation of the valve 10, which is the two-sided cam lock with the big yellow handle. So if you have a caged pump, then you're going to want the straight portion of that valve facing towards the front. And if you have a non-caged version, which usually that would be the base system, or if it's attached to a 130 or 230 gallon tank, then you're going to want the 90-degree portion to be facing forward. And match the torque specs that I have listed here up on the screen. So notice these are in inch pounds, not foot pounds. So the bolts that mesh the valve to the spacer is 75 to 85 inch pounds, and the torque spec to match the riser to the pump cover is 50 to 60 inch pounds. Just remember, it's 12 inch pounds to a foot pound, so very, very little pressure is required here. If you do not have a torque wrench that measures in inch pounds, just snug them up a little bit, do a water test, and if there's a little bit of leaking, just go around and tighten each one just a tiny little bit at a time. You do not want to over tighten these, because you will crack your plastic fittings and then you will have a leak.
That should do it. I hope you found this video helpful. If you have any questions about what we've done here today or about any other RynoWorx products, please visit us at www.RynoWorx.com. That's RynoWorx.com. Thanks a lot and have a great day.